My parents told me to come home for Christmas, only to ask me to take in my sister's kids so she could have a fresh start. Days later, she dropped them on my doorstep with a note, saying they were my problem. Now, it's kind of a long story, but I need to write it down somewhere. I'm Mel, and I haven't talked to my parents or my sister. I'll call her Jen in 8 years. Not really sure how to start this, but here goes. I work at this big investment firm downtown. You know those tall buildings with the fancy lobbies where everyone's wearing suits? Yeah, one of those. I'm good at my job. Saved up enough to buy a place, and I'm married to Dan, 32 male, who's this really great lawyer. Honestly, life's pretty good now, but it wasn't always like this. Growing up, it was always about my sister Jen. She's 3 years older, and my parents treated her like she was perfect. Every little thing she did was amazing to them. Got a C+ in math. At least she tried her best. Dropped out of college. College isn't for everyone. Got married at 19 to some guy she met at a gas station. Young love is so beautiful. Meanwhile, I was busting my butt getting straight A's working part-time at this boring office supply store and trying to get into a good college. But nothing I did was ever enough. Like I could have discovered the cure for cancer, and they would have been like, "That's nice, honey, but did you see Jen's new hair color?" The real problem started when I got my college acceptance letter. I had a partial scholarship to study finance, which was huge for me. I'd been planning this forever. My Dad's mom had left some money specifically for my education. It wasn't a ton, but combined with my scholarship and savings, it would have covered everything. I remember running home that day thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd finally be proud of me. Found my mom sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone like always. Dad was in his usual chair watching TV. "Mom." "Dad, I got in." I showed them the letter. Mom barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. So can we talk about the college fund? You know, Grandma's money." That's when Dad turned off the TV. Never a good sign about that. He started doing that thing where he wouldn't look at me. We had to use that money for something else. I felt like someone had dumped ice water on me. "What do you mean?" "Well, Jen's wedding is coming up, and you know how expensive weddings are." I just stood there trying to process what I was hearing. They'd taken my college fund, the money my grandma left specifically for my education, and spent it on Jen's third wedding. Yeah, you read that right. Third, she'd already had 2 failed marriages by 23. I lost it. Started yelling about how unfair it was, how they always picked Jen over me. Mom got defensive, saying I was being selfish and should be happy for my sister. Dad just sat there looking uncomfortable like he always did when there was conflict. That night I packed my bags and left. Only took what could fit in my car. I drove to my Aunt Pat's house. She's my mom's sister, but they barely talk because Mom says she's too opinionated. Translation: Aunt Pat actually calls them out on their BS. Aunt Pat took me in without question. Found out later that she'd been saving money for her son's college fund, but he'd passed away in a car accident a few years before. She offered to help me with college, but I only accepted on the condition that I'd pay back every cent. College was rough, really rough. I was taking full-time classes while working at this cafe that always smelled like burnt coffee. Had to maintain a certain GPA to keep my scholarship, so I basically lived in the library. But you know what, I did it. Graduated with honors, got a job at the investment firm where I still work, and paid back every cent to Aunt Pat within 2 years. That's also where I met Dan. He was handling some legal stuff for the firm, and we kept running into each other in the break room. He asked me out for coffee, and the rest is history. We got married last year, bought a house, and things were finally going well. I hadn't talked to my family in all this time, like zero contact, no calls, no emails, nothing. Jen had my number but never used it. My parents sent a card when I graduated, probably because Aunt Pat told them, but that was it. So, yeah, that's the background. Had to explain all this, so what happened next makes sense, but it all started last Christmas. I know I should have seen it coming because my Aunt Pat was acting weird for days. Like she'd start saying something on the phone, then stop herself, but I was too busy with work to really notice. Dan and I had this tradition of spending Christmas Eve at Aunt Pat's. She makes these amazing cinnamon rolls that make the whole house smell incredible. And we usually just hang out, watch movies, and open one present each at midnight. It's chill, you know? So we show up at her place around 6 p.m. I'm carrying this huge tray of my attempt at sweet potato casserole. Probably not as good as hers, but I try. And Dan's got the gifts. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was wrong. There were too many coats on the rack, too many shoes by the door. Then I heard them. My mom's laugh, my dad's voice, my sister Jen talking loudly about something. I literally froze in the doorway. Dan walked right into me because I stopped so suddenly. The casserole almost went flying. 8 years. It had been 8 years since I'd seen any of them. And there they were, sitting in Aunt Pat's living room like they belonged there. Mom's hair was mostly gray now. She used to dye it religiously. Dad had gotten pretty heavy. And Jen, well, Jen looked exactly the same, except now she had 2 kids I'd never met clinging to her legs. Aunt Pat came rushing over, looking like she was about to cry. Mel, I'm so sorry. They just showed up an hour ago. I tried to call, but your phone went straight to voicemail. My phone was in my bag, on silent cause of work stuff. Great timing, right? I couldn't move, like physically couldn't make my feet work. Dan put his hand on my back and whispered, "We can leave if you want." But before I could answer, my mom spotted me. Mel, sweetheart. She came rushing over like we'd seen each other yesterday, tried to hug me and everything. I stepped back so fast I bumped into Dan again. "What are you doing here?" My voice came out weird. Too high. "It's Christmas." Mom said it like that. Explained everything. Family should be together on Christmas. Dad was still sitting in his chair doing that awkward half-wave thing. Jen was busy with her kids, but I could see her watching me. The kids, God, I didn't even know their names then, looked confused. The older one, a boy around 7, whispered something to Jen, probably asking who I was. I went straight to the kitchen. Needed to put down the casserole before I dropped it. Needed to breathe. The kitchen had always been my safe space at Aunt Pat's house. I'd spent so many hours here doing homework or helping her bake. Dan followed me in. He's good like that. Always knows when I need backup. "You okay?" I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. Aunt Pat came in looking miserable. They showed up saying they wanted to make things right. I told them it wasn't a good idea to surprise you like this. "But you know your mother?" Yeah, I did know my mother. Queen of doing whatever she wanted and dealing with the consequences later. I could hear the kids playing in the living room now. Someone had turned on Christmas music. It all felt so wrong, like I'd walked into some parallel universe where the last 8 years hadn't happened. "Should we go?" Dan asked again. He was already reaching for his car key. I almost said yes. Really wanted to say yes. But then I looked at Aunt Pat's face. She decorated everything so nicely, made all this food, and now she was caught in the middle of this mess. "No," I said finally. "This is our tradition. I'm not letting them ruin it." Dan nodded. He gets me, you know. Aunt Pat squeezed my hand. "Just give me a minute," I said, heading for the back door. Needed some air. It was freezing outside. I hadn't grabbed my coat, but the cold felt good. Helped clear my head. I could see through the kitchen window. Everyone moving around inside, looking so normal, like a regular family on Christmas Eve. That's when my mom came out. Didn't even bring a coat for me. Typical. "You're going to catch cold," she said, like she'd been saying that to me every day for the past 8 years. Like she had any right to act like my mother now. I had so many questions. Why now? Why like this? Why not call first? But what came out was, why are you really here? Well, she started doing that thing where she takes forever to get to the point. It's about Jen. Of course it was about Jen. When wasn't it about Jen? What about her? She's going through some changes. I waited. Mom always does this. Talks in circles until someone makes her get to the point. Finally, she said, "Jen's getting divorced again." I just stared at her like, was that supposed to be news? Jen getting divorced was like the sun rising. Happened pretty regularly. And I said, and she needs some time to rebuild her life to find herself. Something in her tone made me nervous. What does that have to do with me? That's when Dad came out. Still no coat for me, BTW. He had this look on his face, the same one he had when he told me they'd spent my college fund. "Mel," he said, trying to sound all businesslike. "You've done well for yourself. Good job, nice house, stable marriage." I didn't like where this was going. I thought they came to apologize or feel some regret, but no. Even after all these years, they still want to use me to help Jen. We were thinking, Mom jumped in. "Maybe you could take Ben and Lisa for a while." I legit thought I'd heard wrong. "Take them just until Jen gets back on her feet," Dad added quickly. "She needs time to sort things out, find a new place, maybe go back to school." I stood there trying to process what they were saying. They wanted me, who they hadn't spoken to in 8 years, to take custody of Jen's kids. "Are you serious right now?" "It makes perfect sense," Mom said, like she was suggesting I water her plants while she was on vacation. "You've got that big house, Dan's got a good job and you work from home sometimes. I work from home like twice a month. Still, the kids would have stability structure and Jen really needs this chance to what? I interrupted. Party, find husband number 4. Mom's face got all pinched. That's not fair. Not fair. I laughed, but not because anything was funny. You know what's not fair? Showing up at Christmas after 8 years of silence and asking me to raise someone else's kids. Dad tried to step in. Now Mel number, just no. Where's Jen anyway? Why isn't she asking me herself? Right on cue, Jen appeared in the doorway. She must have been listening the whole time. There you are, she said, like we were all just hanging out. I was wondering where everyone went. The kids were with her. Ben looking sleepy and Lisa clutching this stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. These are your aunt and uncle, Jen told them, pointing at me and Dan, who quietly appeared behind me with my coat. Aunt Mel and Uncle Dan. The kids just stared at us. Can't blame them. Ben's 7, Lisa's 5. Jen continued like she was introducing her pets or something. They're really good kids, super independent. Ben can even make his own breakfast. The way she said it like that was a selling point made my stomach hurt. A 7-year-old shouldn't have to make his own breakfast. Dan spoke up for the first time. This seems like something that needs more discussion. Maybe not on Christmas Eve. Bless him for trying to be diplomatic, but Jen wasn't having it. What's there to discuss? You guys have everything. Big house, good jobs, no kids. It's perfect. I just need 6 months, maybe a year tops. A year? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Well, yeah. Gotta get my life together, you know? Maybe travel a bit, figure out what I want. What about their dad? I asked. Jen waved her hand dismissively. Oh, he's useless. Probably in Vegas or something, I had to ask. Which one, Dad? Number 1, 2, or 3? Mom gasped. Mel. But Jen just laughed. Number 2, number 1 moved to Canada. And number 3, well, that marriage got annulled, so he doesn't really count. I couldn't deal with this. Turned to go inside, but Jen grabbed my arm. Come on, sis, help me out here. I need this. I'm suffocating. I looked at her hand on my arm, looked at the kids, looked at my parents who were watching this whole thing like it was going to work out just the way they planned. No one simple word should have been the end of it. After that disaster of a Christmas Eve, I thought things would calm down. Like maybe they'd get the message and leave us alone. Yeah, I was wrong. Jen started showing up at our house. At first it was just random visits with the kids. She'd bring them over saying stuff like they should get to know their aunt and uncle. I felt bad for Ben and Lisa, so I'd let them in. They're actually sweet kids when Jen isn't around, but then the visits got weird. She started coming alone always when she knew Dan would be working from home. I didn't think much of it at first. Dan works from home on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and I'm usually at the office those days. It was our neighbor who first said something. She's this older lady who lives next door and basically sees everything that happens on our street. She caught me getting my mail one day and was like, "Your sister sure dresses up to visit your husband." I was confused. What do you mean, oh, always wearing those little dresses when she comes by even in this cold? And she stays for hours sometimes. That's when things clicked. All those times, Jen just happened to stop by when Dan was home alone, always needing his legal advice about her divorce. I asked Dan about it that night. He looked really uncomfortable, which isn't like him at all. I was going to tell you, he said it's been getting inappropriate. Turns out Jen had been hardcore flirting with him for weeks. She'd show up in these tiny outfits, always finding excuses to lean over his desk or touch his arm. Dan kept trying to be professional because 1, he's a decent human being, and 2, she's technically his client for the custody stuff we're dealing with. But the last straw, she literally told him, and I quote, if you ever get tired of the boring version, you could always upgrade to the fun sister. The boring version, she meant me. My own sister called me boring while hitting on my husband. Dan shut it down immediately. Told her she needed to find different legal representation and that she wasn't welcome at our house anymore when I wasn't home. I was furious. Called Jen right away. She picked up all cheerful like nothing was wrong. Hey sis, I was just thinking about stopping by tomorrow. Stay away from my husband. She laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, come on. We were just having fun. Dan's been so helpful with all this legal stuff. Jen, I swear to God you're overreacting. Besides, it's not my fault if Dan finds me attractive. I mean, we all know I was always the pretty one. I hung up, called my parents because surely they'd see how messed up this was. Mom's response, You know how Jen gets when she's stressed. Maybe if you'd agreed to take the kids, she wouldn't be acting out like this. I can't even make this stuff up. Dan suggested we install security cameras, said we might need evidence of her behavior for what he thinks is coming. He's dealt with enough custody cases to recognize the signs, he said. I wanted to believe he was wrong. I wanted to believe Jen would at least pretend to be a decent mother, if not for herself, then for her kids. But Dan was right. The next morning we woke up to the doorbell ringing over and over. Something felt wrong. I got up and pulled open the curtains, and there they were. Jen's kids, Ben and Lisa, sitting on our front steps. No jackets, no gloves, just two small suitcases beside them, and Lisa clutching that beat-up stuffed rabbit like it was the only thing keeping her together. I bolted for the door, barely aware that Dan was right behind me. The second I opened it, the freezing air hit me like a slap. But it didn't matter. Ben stood up stiffly, rubbing his arms. "Aunt Mel." His voice was too quiet, too resigned, like he already knew he wasn't supposed to expect much from adults. Dan was already scooping Lisa up, rubbing her frozen hands between his. I grabbed Ben's suitcase. It was light, too light. When I opened it later, I'd find just a few shirts, some underwear, and nothing else. Then I saw the note. It was crumpled in Ben's tiny fist. He hesitated before handing it to me like he was already bracing for disappointment. I unfolded it with shaking hands. "They're your problem now. I need to live my life, Jen." I felt the ground drop out from under me for a second. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the sheer cruel. She left them. She actually left them like they were some inconvenient baggage she could just dump and forget about. I clenched the note so hard it nearly ripped. I was shaking with rage, with disbelief, with something so raw I couldn't even name it. Dan's voice was tight with barely contained fury. "Get them inside now!" I scooped up Ben even though he was too big to carry and slammed the door shut behind us. Jen was gone and she wasn't coming back. After that, Dan went into full lawyer mode. He's usually pretty laid back, but I've never seen him so angry. He got the kids inside while I grabbed their suitcases. The bags were barely packed, like a couple of t-shirts and some underwear thrown in. Lisa's stuffed rabbit was there, thankfully. She can't sleep without it. We documented everything, took photos of the note, the suitcases, everything. Thank God for our security cameras. They caught Jen dropping the kids off at 4:30 a.m. and driving away in her beat-up Honda. While I was making the kids breakfast, they were starving. Hadn't eaten since dinner the night before. Dan was making calls, like a lot of calls. He contacted CPS first, then the police to file a report, then his law partner who specializes in family cases. My parents showed up around noon. Turns out Jen had texted them saying, "Kids are with Mel now. All good." Like it was totally normal to dump your children on someone's doorstep and disappear. Mom started with her usual excuses. "Jen's just overwhelmed. She needs time. She'll come back when she's ready." Dan shut that down real quick. "This isn't about Jen anymore. This is child abandonment. It's a crime." Dad tried arguing. "But they're family. We can handle this privately." "No," Dan said. "We're doing this by the book. Those kids deserve better than being pawns in Jen's games." That's when my mom started crying. "But if you report her, she'll get in trouble." "Yeah," I said. "That's kind of the point." The kids were watching TV in the other room, but I know they could hear everything. Ben kept looking over at us with this worried expression. He's way too used to adult problems for a 7-year-old. CPS showed up around 2 p.m. They interviewed all of us, took pictures, checked the house. The social worker was really nice. She talked to Ben and Lisa alone for a bit. When she came out, she looked seriously concerned. Turns out this isn't the first time Jen's pulled something like this. She's left them with random friends before, sometimes for days. Ben's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6. 6. He makes her breakfast, helps her dress, makes sure she brushes her teeth. No kid should have to be a parent to their sibling. We tried tracking Jen down, called everyone we could think of. Finally, one of her friends cracked and told us Jen had bought a plane ticket to Las Vegas. She's apparently moving in with some guy she met online gaming. She didn't even tell her kids goodbye. Dan's filed for emergency temporary custody. Says it's the fastest way to make sure the kids are legally protected while everything gets sorted out. CPS agrees. They don't want to put the kids in the system if there's stable family willing to take them. My parents keep calling, begging us not to ruin Jen's life. They don't get it. Jen ruined her own life. We're just making sure she can't ruin her kids' lives too. Right now we're waiting on a court date. The kids are staying with us until then. Dan's converted his home office into a temporary bedroom for them. He's amazing with them. Helped Ben with his math homework tonight and read Lisa 3 bedtime stories until she finally fell asleep. I'm scared, not going to lie. We didn't plan on becoming parents like this, but looking at these kids sleeping on our couch, how could anyone just abandon them? The social worker is coming back tomorrow. I'll update then. The update, one update on the situation with my sister abandoning her kids. Check previous post for background. Quick update on the Jen situation. She's still in Vegas posting pics of herself at pools and casinos like she didn't just abandon her kids. Meanwhile, things with my parents got even messier. So CPS called a family meeting yesterday. We all sat down at this big table in Dan's office. The kids were with Aunt Pat, thank God, because what happened was rough. The social worker started explaining how the system works, talking about temporary guardianship and stuff. My parents kept nodding like they were following along until she got to the part about Jen potentially facing criminal charges. Mom lost it, started crying about how everyone makes mistakes and she's still their mother. Then the social worker dropped the bomb. Given the circumstances, we need to discuss permanent placement options. Mr. and Mrs., my parents' last name. As the maternal grandparents, you would be the first choice before we consider foster care. You guys should have seen their faces. Dad started stammering. Oh no, we can't. We're too old. We don't have the space. Mom jumped in. Besides, Mel and Dan have that big house. They're young. They have money. It was like watching history repeat itself. Same excuses, different situation. Reminded me of that day they told me they'd spent my college fund on Jen's wedding. Dan, bless him, wasn't having any of their excuses. Actually, he said, pulling out some papers. Your house has 4 bedrooms. You recently took out a home equity loan to renovate your kitchen, so finances aren't the issue. And according to state law as grandparents, you're legally obligated to be considered first for placement. My dad got all red in the face. Now see here, young man. No, you see here. Dan cut in. He never raises his voice. But man, when he uses his lawyer tone, people listen. Your daughter abandoned her children and threw them at us. She's in Vegas spending money on hotels, while her 7-year-old son is acting as a parent to his 5-year-old sister. This isn't about what's convenient for you. It's about those kids. Mom tried again. But Mel, stop it, I said. All those old feelings from the college fund thing came rushing back. Stop trying to make me fix Jen's messes. You did this her whole life. Cleaned up after her, made excuses, pushed her responsibilities onto me. Not anymore. Then the social worker cleared her throat. If you're unwilling to take custody, we'll need to document your refusal. This will be part of the court record. And if no relatives step up, the kids will enter foster care system. That got their attention. See, my parents care a lot about what people think of them. It's why they spent so much on Jen's wedding. Had to keep up appearances. Document? Mom looked horrified. You mean this would be on record? Yes, the caseworker said calmly. It will be officially noted that you declined custody of your grandchildren. While it won't be publicly accessible, it will be part of the case file and legal record. Mom's face pale so people could find out. If it comes up in court or an official inquiry, yes. And if a family member chooses to share it, there's nothing stopping them. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The next hour was wild. My parents tried everything. Guilt trips, crying, even offering me money. Ironic, right? By the end of the meeting, my parents had signed temporary custody papers. They're picking up the kids tomorrow. Ms. T's going to do weekly checks. Dan's made sure they can't just pass the kids back to Jen if she shows up. Everything has to go through the courts now. I feel weird about it. Like I know it's the right thing for the kids. They need stability. But watching my parents do the right thing only because they were forced to brings back a lot of old stuff. Ben asked me earlier if this meant he didn't have to be in charge of Lisa anymore. God, these kids deserved so much better. I don't know how things will move from now on. Let's just hope for better, but I'll keep you guys updated. Final update. Update to the ongoing situation with my sister abandoning her kids. See previous posts? Okay, Reddit. Got a lot to update you guys on. Remember how Jen was living it up in Vegas? Yeah, that didn't last long. Dan's law firm worked with local authorities to track her down. Turns out she was staying at some cheap motel off the strip with this guy she met gaming. Not the fancy resort she was posting pics from. She was just hanging around the nice hotels, taking selfies and pretending she was staying there. The cops showed up at her motel room on Tuesday morning. According to the report, she tried saying she was just taking a vacation, and the kids were perfectly fine with their sister. The officers weren't impressed. They brought her back yesterday. Not going to lie, seeing her in handcuffs was weird. She didn't look like the confident sister who'd been hitting on my husband and demanding we raise her kids. She looked small scared. The charges are pretty serious. Child abandonment, child neglect from before she left them with us. Child endangerment, some other legal stuff I don't fully understand, but Dan says are bad. The DA's office interviewed Ben and Lisa last week. They're doing this thing called a forensic interview where they talk to kids about abuse or neglect. Ben told them everything. How he's been taking care of Lisa since he was 6, how Jen would leave them alone for days, how they sometimes didn't have food in the house because she spent the money on herself. Lisa started crying during her interview when they asked about meals, said she was scared they'd have to go hungry again. I had to leave the room. My parents are freaking out. They keep trying to get Dan to make this go away. He flat out refused, told them if they try to interfere with the legal process, they could lose custody of the kids too. Mom tried the whole but she's mentally ill excuse. Yeah, no, Jen's not mentally ill, she's just selfish, always has been. They're doing a psych eval anyway as part of the case, but Dan says it's standard procedure. The gaming guy from Vegas. Turns out he had no idea Jen even had kids. She told him she was this rich single girl looking for adventure. He actually contacted Dan's office when he found out the truth, wanting to help with the case. Sent screenshots of all their conversations where she bragged about having no responsibilities and being totally free. Jen's not talking to any of us now. Her court-appointed lawyer told her to stay quiet, but she did send me this long text last night. You happy now? You finally got everyone to notice you instead of me. Bet you planned this whole thing. You were always jealous that Mom and Dad loved me more. Well, congrats. Hope you're satisfied now that you've ruined my life. I didn't respond. What's there to say? She abandoned her kids on my doorstep in the middle of winter. She did this to herself. They even searched her motel room. They found receipts for designer clothes and expensive restaurants. She had money. She just chose to spend it on herself instead of her kids. And yeah, it's been 6 months since everything went down with Jen. The court case finally wrapped up last week. Jen took a plea deal. She's getting 18 months in state prison with possibility of parole after 12 months plus 5 years probation after release. She also lost all parental rights. The judge wasn't playing around. Said something about how the systematic neglect and final abandonment showed a complete disregard for her children's well-being. My parents actually got their act together, which honestly surprised everyone. I think finally seeing all the evidence in court, hearing what Ben and Lisa had been through, it changed something. Mom actually stood up in court and said Jen needed to face consequences. Never thought I'd see that happen. The kids are doing better. Like, actually better. Not just putting on a brave face better. They're still living with my parents, but there's been a complete change in how things work. My parents had to take parenting classes as part of the custody agreement. Dan's idea. He's scary smart about this stuff. They've set up proper bedrooms, got the kids into good schools, and taken them to therapy every week. My parents tried reaching out after everything settled. Dad sent this long email about how sorry he was about the college fund, how he sees things differently now. Mom keeps trying to call saying she wants to start fresh. But you know what? Some things you can't just apologize away. 8 years of silence. Then they only show up when they need something. Nah, I'm done. Aunt Pat's been amazing through all this. She visits the kids at my parents' house regularly, makes sure they're actually taking care of them properly. The kids adore her. They call her Grandma Pat, which honestly feels more right than my parents being grandparents. Jen's in prison where she belongs. She sent me this dramatic letter full of excuses and self-pity, talking about how prison changed her and how she sees everything differently now. Not one word asking about her kids. Classic Jen. That letter went straight in the trash. Dan and I see the kids every other weekend, but not at my parents' house. We pick them up and take them out. Movies, parks, normal aunt and uncle stuff. Ben asked me last week if I was mad at my parents. Told him the truth that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings about each other, but that doesn't change how much we love him and Lisa. People keep asking if I'll ever forgive my parents or Jen. Honestly, there are some things you can't come back from. Yeah, they're taking care of the kids now, but only because they were forced to. They haven't changed. they just ran out of options. So here we are. The kids are safe, they have stability, even if it's not the perfect situation. As for my parents, we keep it strictly about the kids. No personal conversations, no unnecessary drama. Sometimes distance is the healthiest choice. And as for me, well, life moves forward. And oh, I found out that I'm pregnant, and Dan is over the moon. Edit. Thanks for all the support through this crazy journey. Reddit, you guys helped more than you know. Edit 2. Yes, Ben and Lisa know they can call us anytime. We got them their own phones kids versions with parental controls specifically for this Edit 3. To everyone asking, the cats still love having the kids over for weekends. Ben's actually helping me teach the new kitten tricks. Final edit. This account is probably going dark after this post. Dan says it's better not to have too many details online once everything is finalized. Just know that we're all doing fine.